Hello everyone, my name is Iris Schreier and I'm hosting a knit-along for the Straight on the Bias shawl, which is a boomerang shape with an I-cord edging which is knitted on throughout the pattern. This is on Ravelry. You can look up Straight on the Bias and it starts on September 1. And it requires 2 skeins of Art Yarn's Merino Cloud. I highly recommend the new ombres, and I have examples of those right here. As you could see, the ombre transition is, in this case, light to dark, and that's exactly what I used in the shawl that is on the table here. And you can find on Ravelry as well, Straight on the Bias. So I chose to start with the lightest color, and I made a little I-cord beginning of the pattern here for you to see. This is already done, but I'm gonna take it out and show you how I do it because it's really a great thing to practice. Once you get the edging right, everything else falls into place and looks amazing because the I-cord continues throughout and gives your project a very polished look. And I-cord is a tube, and it's also a great way to bury ends. It's just a wonderful skill to have in knitting. Makes for beautiful finishing for projects. So this is what you're gonna make today, and I'm gonna take it out right now and start all over. So let me rip out what I did. And I start with an I-cord cast on. And in the abbreviations, I tell you exactly this. You cast on 3 stitches any way you like. I use a long tail cast on, which leaves me a tail and the working yarn. And typically the tail is fine as is, but because of the demonstration today, I'm gonna cut it so it doesn't get in the way and doesn't confuse anyone, so it's way short. Okay, so now I have 3 stitches on the needle. As you can see, 1, 2, 3. The working yarn, which is the yarn attached to my ball, is attached to the topmost stitch on the needle. And in order to continue, I need to reposition it. So I want to transfer these 3 stitches from my right side to my left side. I use circular needles because I like not having to deal with the possible dropping of the needles, but you can use any needles you like. I'm working on 6s. The project calls for 7s. I'm a loose knitter, so I'm always one size lower than I tell you to use. In order to continue with the I-cord, I can't knit the first stitch if the working yarn is attached to it. I have to reposition the stitches, and I'm gonna slip them from my right needle to my left needle. 1, the first 3 are a little bit difficult, and I'm just gonna make sure I catch the whole stitch as I slip it. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and if I need to, I tug on the shorter tail in order to make sure there are no loose stitches. Okay, so now I have the stitches in position to knit because I have the working yarn attached to the 3rd stitch on the needle. And I take that working yarn from behind and I knit the 3 stitches just as though I'm doing a regular knitting project. 1, 2, 3. So that's my first row. And it's my first row of 5 rows that I'm instructed to knit. So the next step is I see my working yarn is attached to the topmost stitch on my needle, which means I need to reposition them. So I'm going to slip them over. This time they go much easier. 1, 2, 3. And now that my working yarn is attached to the 3rd stitch on my needle, I can knit with it to create this I-cord. 1, 2, 3. So I've just knitted 3 stitches. Okay, and that's my second row. And once again, because my working yarn is attached to the topmost stitch, I need to reposition and I'm slipping them from the right to left needle. Then I take the yarn from behind and I knit those 3 stitches. And it's pretty miraculous. All of a sudden a tube starts to form, and you'll see it after the 3rd row. So this is my 3rd row. And once again, my working yarn is attached to my topmost stitch and I need to reposition them. So I slip them from my right to my left needle. And now I'm going to knit the 4th row. 1, 2, 3. So I have 4 rows knitted. Definite tube there, where all you see when you turn it around is stockinette. The working yarn is attached to the topmost stitch. I need to transfer to my left needle by slipping. And now I'm up to my 5th row. And my 5th row again, I'm going to knit 3, and I reposition by transferring the stitches, slipping them one at a time to my left needle. And now I'm in position to begin the 1st row of the setup, because I have my 5-row I-cord, and what I do is I follow the instructions in the setup of the pattern by knitting 3 stitches, and then it tells me to pick up and knit. Pick up and knit means that you go to the next loop. This is the adjacent loop right here, and I'm going to insert my needle in that loop. Do you see it? I just want to make sure it's very visible here. I'm pulling it up with my other needles so you guys can see it. Okay, this is the 3rd loop. This is the 4th loop. Actually, I knitted 3, and this is the adjacent loop. I'm going to put my needle inside. I'm going to wrap the yarn around that needle and pull out a loop, so as though I knitted into that loop. So then I need to pick up and knit again in the next, so I go into the very next loop next to it, and then I pick up a stitch by pulling my needle through and getting the yarn wrapped around it. And one last time, I need to pass my needle through the stitch, wrap the yarn around, and pull it through. So my working yarn is now attached to the topmost stitch here. And then the most important thing now is to bring this working yarn, which is in the back naturally because you've been knitting, and to bring it to the front. And you see how it crosses over and it's on my front and it's facing me. And now I'm instructed just to pick up 3 loops, not to knit them, just to pick them up. So I pick up the next adjacent loop, which I try not to pick up the one that's connected to the same stitch I just picked up, which you want to avoid. So this is the next adjacent loop, and then this is the one right after it. And then my 3rd, I tried to pick up in that knot where I began my knitting, my cast on, so that I get all the way to the very edge. And it's a little bit tight, and you might have to loosen it. And a good way to loosen it is by rubbing it, bringing it up and down the needle a little bit. Okay, so I have my 3 tight stitches that are actually not knitted. They're just picked up loops. And then my 6 knitted stitches, and the working yarn is right here in the back. And I'm in position to start the next row. And on the next row, what I'm going to do is follow the instructions, which tell me to knit that first stitch. And I'm knitting it in this situation, in this case, through the back loop. It's a little bit easier to get at it. Doesn't really matter with that very first time you knit it. Okay, and I'm going to knit the second one again through the back loop. And I'm going to knit the 3rd one again through the back loop. And those are now knitted. They weren't knitted before, now they're knitted. And then I'm told to purl 3 stitches. Purling is the opposite of knitting. you're just doing everything with the yarn in front, purl, purl, purl. And now I slip 3 stitches with the yarn in front, and you're going to keep doing that throughout the project, slipping 3 stitches with the yarn in front. So I slip them purlwise, and here you go. The working yarn is attached to the 4th stitch on the needle. The first 3 stitches are not attached to the working yarn, and that's what forms your I-cord edging, because when you continue and follow the instructions and continue knitting to create this, you're going to find that your beautiful I-cord edging is going to continue in this manner. So you're always working to the last 3 stitches where you're going to slip them with a yarn in the front, just as I did here. And the instructions tell you what to do. So, you know, I'm very excited to start working my stitches, and I can start with my purple yarn, which I love, and see how the colors look together. And this is the exciting part. So here would be my next row, and if the instructions told me just to knit, which I don't believe they do, but you guys will get them when you sign up for the knit along. You could see how my I-cord continues, and I always slip with 3 stitches with the yarn in front. Thanks so much, and I look forward to having you join me. Look for the instructions for what I just explained to you with a video on the discussion group. I'm going to post them there so that you could more easily follow along when you have written instructions as well as the video. Thanks a lot. Bye.